In this video, we'll consider the risk analysis approaches taken in our two case studies. But let me begin with a language distinction, if I may. When we talk about risk analysis, we are talking about the process of risk management, risk assessment, and risk communication. There are other people who call that very same process risk management. So one of the more difficult choices we had when we created this graduate certificate was trying to decide whether to call it a graduate certificate in risk analysis or a graduate certificate in risk management. Eventually, a graduate certificate in risk management was chosen in the belief that that term was probably better known to more people, and it was basically a marketing decision. But let me begin then by introducing the Corps of Engineers risk management model here. This basically is their risk analysis approach, and they also prefer to use the term risk management as the overarching concept. Here's a little bit of background on this model. After Hurricanes Katrina and Rita, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers made a conscious decision to become more of a risk management agency. That process is still underway, and so as yet, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers does not have a formal risk management model that it has adopted. However, this is the model that they are considering, and if the choice was made today, they would choose the model that you're looking at. It has 5 steps. It begins by establishing a decision context, and then the next 2 steps are to identify and analyze risks. These steps together comprise the risk assessment. You see that in the beige box that contains these 2 steps. After the risk assessment piece of this, risk managers have to evaluate the risks and make risk mitigation decisions. You'll notice on the left and on the right are ongoing processes. On the left, you'll find the risk communication process, along with continuing consultation and collaboration. On the right, you'll find the risk monitoring, risk evaluation, and risk modification process. So this model is really quite compatible with the model that we're talking about in Chapter 3 of the text. But this model was not formally adopted, and it wasn't in the mind of every person who was working on the GLIMRIS study, although several were well aware of it. So let's now go to that study. Here is the GLIMRIS report, and we will be discussing these underlying study principles in a later video, but for right now what I would like you to know is this. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has a water resources planning process that has been prescribed for them by the Congress, and it consists of the 6 steps that you're looking at. These 6 steps are very compatible with the risk management model that we were just looking at as well. And so although it would be more accurate to say they were following this planning process, they were in fact doing something that was very compatible with what we've been discussing. This is a figure taken from the GLIMRIS risk assessment. And what I would like you to see here is that risk assessment process that was described in 2 steps here in this particular model, the Corps unpacked that and broke it down into this series of steps. You'll become more familiar with these as we move through the course, but here's what I would like you to understand now, that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers did indeed have a process in mind as they began this risk analysis that they did. Now let's take a look at the Vibrio parahemolyticus in oysters. Here's a little quote from that risk assessment that says the Vibrio parahemolyticus risk assessment follows the risk assessment structure of the Joint Food and Agricultural Organization World Health Organization expert consultation on the application of risk analysis to food safety issues. This indicates this report was published in 1998. It was actually published in 1995. And that document is shown here. Now, I will step you through it just very briefly so you get the idea that when the U.S. FDA, Center for Food Safety and Applied Nutrition, undertook its risk assessment for Vibrio parahemolyticus, they were following a model also. They were following the model that was presented in this document. Here is the risk assessment of biological agents in foods. So this chapter 6 in particular would have been followed by the FDA. And if I scroll down just a little bit faster, you can see here some risk analysis definitions. And let's look at this risk analysis. They basically describe this in a way that's identical with what we are doing in our text, calling risk analysis a process consisting of three components: risk assessment, risk management, and risk communication. So you have a great example here. The Army Corps of Engineers calls the overall process risk management, but in it we see risk assessment, risk management, and risk communication. FDA uses a risk analysis process, and in it we see risk assessment, risk management, and risk communication. So I won't be able to tell you enough, although you'll probably think I tell you too much, that the language of risk is very messy. So just be careful that you understand the principles, because the language is used in different ways by many different people.